Hello everyone, I hope you're all well. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I thought we'd create another seasonal card. So I've started with a piece of Pink Frog smooth card, and this is 4.5 inches by 8 inches. So the sort of like a DL card. So it's 4.5 by 8. And then I've created a mat that's 4 3/4 by 8 1/4, and then a card blank 5 inches by 8 inches, so that I've got sort of a long card. So let's work on the piece that's 4.5 by 8. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by knocking things over is what I'm going to do, which is what I always do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my stamp set 389, which is pine cone. And I'm going to use sort of part of this image here to give me the element at the top of my card. So I'll take, now it's an A4 stamp, so this is quite big. So the pine cone is quite a big stamp. So let's just take an A5 acrylic block. So I've got my A5 acrylic block, and it's only the sort of top half I want. And you can see which way it goes because the text gives you the direction. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use VersaFine Clair Verdant and VersaFine Clair Shady Lane. So we'll start with our light colour. Let's just grab some scrap paper. I always need scrap paper once I've started. And I can never pick up the scrap paper either, just as I'm trying to do it. So we'll just grab our VersaFine Clair. And what I'm going to do first is just have a look which part of the sort of stem and everything else that I want. Okay, so we want that. So I'm going to ink a little bit of the text and the stem and sort of the berries. I don't want the actual pine cone. I just want a little bit of this stem and foliage. Now, don't worry about if you haven't got this particular stamp, then you can draw some lines, or you can use my Tree of Life stamp set, and you can use the sort of tree as adding some little branches at the top. I'm then going to add my Shady Lane. So let's add touches of that shady lane. You can tell it's first thing in the morning because I can't speak. And I'm just going to tear a piece of this copy of paper. I'm just going to sort of place that so that most of my card is covered, it's masked off. And before I stamp anything, I can just take a look at what I've got. So let's take that up a little bit, and I can see exactly the area that I've got and that is showing. So just take your time just to add the top half of that. I love it because it's got a little bit of text. I love this stamp set because it doesn't date. So I really love that fact as well. It just doesn't date. So this is stamp set number 389, and again, I'm using it several years later, even if I'm only using part of it. It's just wonderful. So I'm just allowing that ink just to soak onto there. And again, it's only the top half of my card, so I'm not too stressed about perfection. That is just what I want. So I've now got sort of a little bit of that stamp and twigs just at the top. Just beautiful. Now, if you notice, let's put this stamp set here. this stamp set, you'll see that it's also got these leaves that I've also got in my new October release, the autumn release. It's all planned out, you see. So let's just take, let me just, so that one. So what I'm going to do now is just mask that off, the top half off. So mask that top off. You don't really need to mask it off, but I'm masking it off because I know what I'm like. So what I'm doing is I'm just masking off so I can see the bottom edge of that stamping. And then what I'm going to do is take the VersaFine Clair, and you can just see I'm going for this leaf here at the bottom. So I'm going to take the Verdant. I'm going to take little touches of the Shady Lane, and then I can just see the base of there, and then I can just add, line that out of the way, I can just add a little bit of a leaf here just from this stamp set. There we go. And it just extends that design a little bit. So what I've done is I've used stamp set 389 and I've used part of the branch, but this obviously in itself is a beautiful Christmas card or autumn card, but you've also got these little tiny little leaves here that you can use, and they are separate, just so that you know. Those are a separate stamp. So what you do, I can pick this up and I can just judge if I want little bits of leaves, which is just wonderful. So let's have a look. So this little bit of a leaf here. So I've got these leaves here that are separate on this. Let's just grab a little bit of a white, because obviously I am adding bits of ink to that non-stick craft sheet, which is absolutely fine, but we just don't want to get in a mess. And then I'm going to add little touches of the Shady Lane. And then I'm just sort of building a nice composition for the top of my card. So you can see I've got sort of just touches of those leaves there. And then what I'll do is just take the smaller leaf down here. Let's take that smaller leaf. Again, Verdant and little touches of Shady Lane. And just add a little bit of a leaf just in there. Just beautiful. And then we'll take that little leaf again. Again, Verdant. Little touches of Shady Lane. I love how, you know, the two colours just give that a little bit of a two-tone effect. So I'm just filling that out a little bit. So it's just filled out a little bit. Just beautiful. So just take this again, the little leaf. Again, you can use my Tree of Life to add the tree stems to the top if you wish. I just love using this in some of my seasonal makes. You can also add your second generation as well, just to give it some depth. So that is fine for the top of my card. I particularly don't want to cover that because I want it sort of be more random. Right, let's place those back. Let's place the big stamp back. And then if you bring in, I'm going to be using this stamp set. What I'm going to do first is just grab my circular template. And my circular template, I'm going to be using, do I want, this is where I faff because I decide whether I want one big one. Yes, I'm going to have one big one. One big one, which is 3¼ inches in width across the centre of that circle. And that one, I hadn't better draw around that one because it's been ragged. So let's just add this here. So I'm just going to draw a pencil line around that circle. And all as that is for is just so that I can I get that sort of circular shape. So I've got that down below there. So let's take this stamp set. Now you can see on this stamp set here, let's take this off because you can't see it at all. Now this is my stamp set, so you've got choices to make. I personally added these, for me personally, on my stamp set to be used separately rather than with the whole thing. So the sentiment is separate and this stamp is all together. That is because Tracy tries to cram the stamp rather than leave a gap. I don't like leaving a gap. So rather than leave a gap, I'll add something. So on my stamp set, I'm going to cut these leaves out. Now, this is my stamp set. I'm not saying cut this out. You can just use it as you wish, just on the stamp like that. So if you want to, you can still ink that stamp up and leave it. Let me put it on the same thing. You can leave it on your stamp like so, so that it's at the bottom of your stamp. I haven't. I've cut mine off to make an extra stamp. You don't have to, but for me, Tracy crams so much on there. You know, it's got beautiful detail on there anyway. This can be a separate stamp. So it's entirely up to you. So I've now got my little stamp set. And what I'm going to do, again, I'm going to take the Shady Lane and I'm going to take the Verdant. So I've got these little tiny leaves now. And I've also got some splatters on there, which I'll just take them off. And what I'm going to do is just go around. Let's just make sure. So I'm just going to go around the circle. There we go. So we've got those, and then I've got first generation, and then turn your stamp around and I can get second generation. Let me just show you what we've got, just so that you can see that. Again, I'm going to show you again. If you don't want to have the splatters on, I'm going to make another stamp. So I've now got 3 stamps with little splatters on their own. Don't forget, this is my stamp. So I've got splatters on their own under the leaf now. And you'll see why I've got the little splatters. So I'm going to take the Verdant again, and then I'm going to take Shady Lane. And I keep my stamps in a little wallet. Let me show you. I keep my stamps in a little wallet, so even when I've got small stamps, I can keep them in there. They don't get lost. So then I'm going to, let's take these this way. I'm going to take the first generation. There we go. And then let's take the second generation and add it here. And what you'll eventually do is just fill out your little sort of wreath. So we've got the first generation, and then we'll add the second generation afterwards. So you can still add your first generation where you've added the second generation, just so that it gives depth to the design. It just gives a little bit of depth. So first generation, second generation. So we'll go round again, ink with the Verdant. I don't know why I keep putting the lid on the Shady Lane. Just leave the lid off, Tracy. And then just turn it a little bit each time, because then you get your leaves in a second place, in a different, just a different position. First generation, second generation, just lovely. So ink up again. So you've got that verdant, and then your shady lane. So we've got them going that way, so let's have them this way. First generation, second generation. And then if you feel that you've got a lot of the shady lane and not much of the verdant, on the next one, don't add as much of the darker colour. Turn your card around, it often makes it easier for you to work with. And just first generation and second generation. And then let's just add some of the verdant on its own. Let's add these this way, just so they're going in a different direction. First generation, second generation. So let's just give that a wipe, just so that we can get some of the verdant lighter colour. Let's add them that way. Doesn't matter if you overlap these because they're leaves, so it really doesn't matter. So I'm going to add some of these, the verdant. So don't worry about overlapping your leaves. First generation, second generation, even third generation. So don't worry too much about overlapping. So I'm using some of the lighter colour on its own and overlapping and over stamping some of those leaves. It really doesn't matter. First generation, second generation, third generation. Again, first generation. Take a look where you might have some gaps and you want to put your first and third generations. That just works rather nicely, just so that you've got that. There we go. Right, let's take that, move those out of the way. So now I can place this stamp set. I don't know why I placed it back. We can take this stamp now, and I've got this little stamp I can use on its own as a background stamp now. I can place that back. Which way does that go? Like that. So I can place that back. And now I've got these little splatters. So I've got these little splatters that are on the stamp set. So let's see. Let's grab a nice, we need a very nice red. Let's knock the card all over the floor. Might already be on my desk. Of course it is. So then I'm using these splatters, like so, that are on this stamp set here, that I cut off the bottom here. So I'm going to use them splatters. I'm just going to add some of those splatters, just first generation, second generation, third generation, just to my card. So let's do a first generation. Let's turn it round. So first generation, you can even add this to your finger if you wish, and just stick it on your finger like so. Take this, and as long as it's nice and sticky, you can do your first generation, second generation, third generation. First generation, second and third generation. First, second, third generation. So you're just adding that, and that's with your splatters. I love to think outside the box with my projects. I love to think just about how I'm going to add things. So I've got a decoration on my tree that is like a little, it's like a dangly wreath that I've got on my tree. And this sort of represents that. So I'm then going to just attach it to my foliage, just so that it's attached to the foliage. There we go. Just so that that attaches to the foliage. And then what I'm going to do is I then want to take, let me just, is that going to, I'm planning out my project. So this stamp set here, let me just lift this up from my A4 stamp set. It says, "There is beauty all around us." So I'm going to use that. Preferably not on a big acrylic block like that. So there is beauty all around us. So we'll just take this. You can use whatever sentiment you want. And then what I'm going to do is give myself a two-tone sort of sentiment. What's this one? Do you know what's hilarious is I've got these lids on the wrong ink pad. There you go. Look, a way to confuse yourself. Right, so I'm going to take the verdant, like so, and add that to the top half of the sentiment. Then take the shady lane and add that to the bottom half of the sentiment. And then I'm going to add teeny weeny little touches of the black just here and there. Let's move this out of the way, and I'm then going to add that just to the centre of that wreath. Just take your time and allow that just to grab hold and soak into the card. Obviously it's only a sentiment, it doesn't take much just to grab into there. There is beauty all around us. Just beautiful. So what I'm going to do now, let me just move this. So I'm then going to, now apart from the little splatter stamp, everything else is permanent ink. So I can take my circle, line this back up again. So line this back up again. We'll take some twisted citron and mow lawn. And why have you never got a brush when you want it that is in greens? Never mind. Let's grab a piece of cut and dry foam. So I'm going to take the cut and dry foam and I'm going to take some twisted citron. And you can see I'm really priming that cut and dry foam, whether it's your brush, your blending brushes, your blending tools. Make sure you've got enough ink on there. And then I'm just going to, can you see I'm not blending, I'm dabbing. So dabbing just gives a different look than blending. So I'm just sort of dabbing that ink on there. So dabbing gives a more mottled effect. So I'm just dabbing that on there. Yes, lovely. So I'm just dabbing that ink just on there. And then I'm going to take my mowed lawn just to give me a little bit more darkness to that design. And just add, now don't add too much. Again, because you're dabbing that ink, and if you only put a little bit of ink on your cut and dry foam, if you dab it, it'll stop you from adding too much ink. Dab off the excess. If you're worried about yourself being too heavy-handed, dab off the excess on your card. There we go. So what that does is it sort of fuzzies the edges, which is lovely. It just fuzzies those edges. So I'm going to take some twisted citron, and let's grab a splatter brush. And we'll just pick up some of that, and we'll just add some little splatters to our card. I'm just adding some of those splatters. So I'll just lift that up in a second so that you can see that. Now, if you don't want to just wipe that ink up, you can mop that ink up onto another piece of card. Let me just clean that brush because I've got all that ink in there. There we go. So we've just got those sort of little splatters on there. I love the two-tone sort of sentiment as well. Now, we do want to make it a little bit more opulent. Well, I do anyway, which I shall do shortly. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to take the twisted citron, and I'm just going to go around the edges and just add a little bit of that twisted citron. Now, I don't have to worry about that colour at the top moving. It won't move because it's permanent. Now, you can add the splatters afterwards if you wish. The reason that I added my splatters at that stage is I like to see if I really do want to add any colour around the edges and whether the splatters are enough in their own right. But when I'd splattered, I felt like I wanted to draw your eye into the card. So now I'm just adding colour to the edges. I'm going to add a little bit more depth to that by adding the mowed lawn right to the very edge. And I always think if you're going to send a special Christmas card, I don't think spending half an hour or an hour on a card for somebody special is anything. I think it's for me, it's the least I can do just to give a special card, especially maybe to somebody who, you know, doesn't see anybody at Christmas or doesn't receive any Christmas presents. Just a little card to say, I've remembered you and I'm thinking about you. There we go. Now, you don't, you know, most of you will know that I will make extra backgrounds with that green ink that is left over, and I will normally just mop that up. But I want to do a bit more to this. There we go. There we go. So what I'm going to do then, she says, why I didn't, oh, I did get it out, you see, I'm questioning myself. I'm then going to take my scarecrow stamp set and I'm going to use the little bird. Let's grab the little bird on the scarecrow stamp set. Take my A7 block. Let's place that back. Where did you go? There we go. I'm going to take my little bird to move this, and I'm going to place the little bird in here. I'm going to stamp that in black. So let's stamp. And I'm just making sure there's plenty of ink on there. That's why even with a small stamp, I make sure that I tap it quite a few times. So I'm just going to hide this little bird just within the foliage. So I'm just going to add him to the foliage. And I'm not pressing. What I'm doing is I am just allowing that ink just to absorb into the card. There we go. So we've got our little bird in there, just so that you can see that. I'm then going to take the little tiny bird, the same version of the bird, little tiny version, and now I just want to play around a little bit, so I want one on the little bee there. So I'm going to take this little tiny bird to add to my composition. I'm going to add him to the little bee there. Now you can see my fingers are not forcing that down. My fingers are resting on there. They're not squishing the stamp, they're just resting on the stamp to allow that to absorb into the card. There we go. So we'll just lift this up for you, and then you can see we've just got our bird on there. And then I'm just going to add a third one here. Let's just take our little bird there. And just add him. And you can see there, that's it. It just finishes that off nicely. Let's take that back. And I still want to add something to this, just to make it a little bit more special. It's just, I'll put the lid on that black ink, and you know why, don't you? Because we don't want to drop that black ink after we've just done everything. Right, I've got some not even opened, hopefully easy to handle. What have we got? So I've got copper, silver and gold. So these are gold leaf sheets, or faux gold leaf sheets, just gold anyway, gold sheets. And what I'm going to do is add, oh crikey, there you go, can you see? There's gold leaf on there. I just got these from Amazon. They're relatively cheap. I don't want anything too expensive. So I'll leave it on there for now. Let's just fold that back like so. And then I'm going to use my quickie glue pen. And I'm just going to add, and I'm hoping this is working. And I'm just going to add sort of dots of the gold, just to give a little bit of opulence to my design, to give that a little bit of shimmer and to make it a little bit more special, so that when you turn that card and you tilt it, it gives you a bit of shimmer. So let's add bits here as well. Don't think about it too much. You don't want it too regimented, but this is just to give a little bit of opulence just to the design. And if you waffle to yourself a little bit longer, because you've only added dots of that quickie glue pen, this is the quickie glue pen, and when you get the quickie glue pen, there's like a little bit of plastic at the end here, and you just pull that off. And the only reason I know why is because it took me ages to think, why is it not coming out? There's a little bit of a plastic thing at the end that you need to remove. So I'm using the quickie glue pen. You can use whatever you wish that gives you that tackiness. So I'm hoping then I can pick this one sheet up on this piece of tissue. And of course, they're all tied together, which you would understand. So let's just take this sheet here of this, and because I've got the sheets, I'm hoping I can just place that down and touches of gold will be added to that card. Oh, take it off, Tracy. So touches of that will be added. Oh yes, it's a lot easier in the sheets just to add the gold. And then I've got a little tub that I can add these gold sheets into. So just make sure. So I have got a little tub that I can add this into. Now this is not expensive gold leaf. And what you can do is when you've added your gold leaf, you can then pick this up and just see where you may have missed. Where you may have missed some of the gold, if you have at all. And you just have to give it a few minutes just to grab hold of that. And now, don't forget, you're being a little bit subtle with the gold leaf. You're not overpowering it. I mean, it's your card. You can overpower it as much as you want. And I'm just going to lift that just a little bit, just so that you can see. There we go. Just so you can see the touch of that gold. Let's lift this here. Just so you can see you've got a little bit of shimmer, and that really sort of adds to it. So I'm just going to grab my little pot to put these in. Just makes it easier if I put it away now rather than getting a complete mess. There we go. That's it. And then what we'll do is just go to our bin with all these little bits, just so that we're not working in there we go. Let's move these out of the way, just so that we haven't got them in our way. That's it. So it just gives a little bit of opulence to that design. And it's very difficult to photograph, but you know it's there. And you know whoever you're sending that to has got those little details on there. So I'm then going to move this out of the way. Let's grab my 30 days stamp set. So stamp set 922, my 30 days, which is this one. So I'm going to use 922, 30 days. So it's just perfect. And then I'm just going to, this time we'll have the right ink on here. So Verdant. And then we'll take a little bit of that Shady Lane. And I'm just going to add a little bit of stamping. Oh yes, just lovely. And then a little bit of stamping just here. Oh, just lovely. So I've just added a little bit of stamping here, and you can see I've not overpowered anything. Just lovely. You don't want to overpower the design. let's grab our gel pen. I thought I'd got the gel pen on the desk, which I probably have, but we can't see for the trees. What is it? You can't see the wood for the trees. Something like that anyway. But of course, that one is my favourite gel pen. So let's grab, I nearly grabbed a project then to test it on. So let me just lift that up to make sure it's working. And yes, it would be easier to do it on black card. So let's just add some little touches to the bird just to give it a little bit of whiteness. So just adding a little bit of whiteness to that. And if you want, you can add some white dots just to your project as well, just to give, again, a little bit of lightness. I'm going to add splatters, so that doesn't matter too much. So I've just added some white areas to the birds. I'm then going to add some white splatters, just a few, just to where the wreath is. Not many, I'm just adding a few. There we go. Now, if you don't want to splatter, you just dot. So I've been very subtle with those white splatters. So I'm then going to take my mat and layer, and I'm going to use the darker colour to mat this onto. So I'm going to take my mowed lawn and I'm just going to go around the edges. Look how moist that is. It's easier. Then I don't have to blend it. I'm just going to go around. Now it'll add a thick layer, rich layer, that nobody knows that you haven't matted and layered it onto a piece of card. Now what you would do is mop up that beautiful green ink onto another piece of card to create another background. You know, you wouldn't do what I'm doing because that's sacrilege to just clean that up. So what I'm going to do is just, because that ink is physically, it's just sitting on the surface. It's not doing anything. So I'm just spritzing that with a touch of water. It's just... And I've just gone to the cupboard I needed to go to and shut the cupboard door. So let's grab this again. So I've got a little bit of red twine. I've had this twine years. It's one of the May Arts. I've had it a long, long time. So I've got some of the red twine. And whilst I'm just doing this, my card on the left is doing what I want it to do. So I'm just going to create a very sort of basic bow. I don't want anything too flouncy and fluffy and too over the top. I want something very delicate, just like me. Right, so let's bring that down. And you will often find me faff forever with a tiny little bow. So what I want is just a little bow, a very loose, organic sort of bow. So we're going to bring this card in. Now, you would naturally just let that card dry and let it carry on doing its thing. I'm not going to wait because it's only my mat and layer, and the only reason that I've splattered it is so that that ink isn't just lying on there. So then I'm going to layer this on top of my mat, which now looks like I've used a piece of card, which I haven't. I've just created my own mat. And what you've got here is a card. It's got no dimension if you don't add the little bow. It's just a one layer, as in, yes, we've got lots of layers in there, but what I mean is there's no thickness, there's no bulk. It's just all flat. So we'll just place that on there. And I sort of try to get one edge round about right and then add the rest. Now what you're going to do, because that card underneath, if you're like me and you're a little bit impatient, that card underneath is wet. Now if you dry it with your heat tool, that's great. The heat tool will make it bow a little bit, so that's why I'm not doing it. So just bend it a little bit just to say this is where you're adhering. And then I've got a lovely card blank which was 5 by 8.5. Let's just place this just down there. We'll place this onto the card blank. And I'm using Nuvo Deluxe glue. Let's just add that. And I always make sure there's some glue in the centre of that card. And this is why I like the wet glues, mainly because I've got time to move them. But don't worry if you like your tapes and everything, that's absolutely fine as long as it does the job and you're happy with that. So let's just grab that. There we go. So I'm just making sure that the card is grabbing hold with that adhesive and that everything's dry. So let's just lift this up. So I've not even added a dimensional sentiment, just so that you can see. Just beautiful. And then, just to echo, there we go, and you will go that way, just to echo the red just here, I'm going to add a little bow. Now you don't have to add the bow if you don't want any dimension at all. So I'm just going to add a little bit of this deluxe glue. And this deluxe glue is lovely. It will grab a hold. I just have to give it a couple of seconds just to grab hold of that. There's no point sort of expecting it to grab hold in half a second. You need to give it a little bit of time. So I just hold my finger there, just till it grabs. Once it's grabbed, it's a wonderful glue. I will, of course, faff with the bow. So once it's totally dry, I will sort of faff around with it, just so that it knows who's boss. Just so that you've got the little red organic bow on there, just to echo the little red from the splatters that we did. And then to finish, you can just go round. I know you might think, oh, what a pain, but you can just go round the splatters and just add a few little dots of white to some of the splatters. And then they can be your faux sort of berries. Just to, there we go. And if I lift that up for you, and if I tilt it to the side like this, you can appreciate the full size of the card. If I lift that up, then you can appreciate the gold in there. So you can see that, you can appreciate that gold. If we come down, just tilt that, then you can appreciate that gold. And that gives you another idea for your seasonal makes. So I hope you enjoyed that. Love to all, and I'll see you all soon. Bye for now.